His body was never found. In 378 AD, a Roman emperor and 20,000 of his elite soldiers were erased from existence in a single afternoon of fire and blood. This wasn't just a defeat, it was an annihilation. This is the story of Valens, in the catastrophic battle that sealed Byzantine Rome's fate. It was the single worst decision in Byzantine Roman history. His corrupt generals abused them, starved them, and sold them dog meat at slave prices, until the Goths decided they had nothing left to lose. This is the story of the Battle of Adrianople, today called Edirne, in Turkey, the day the barbarians came for revenge. But his ego wouldn't let him. He wanted all the glory for himself. This is the story of how one emperor's jealousy and arrogance led him to charge into the Battle of Adrianople, a decision that would not only cost him his life, but would break the Roman Empire forever. Hey everyone, welcome to Czar and Truth. I'm Czar. This is the channel where we expose hypocrisy and uncover the truth. If that sounds like something you're passionate about, please subscribe and click the bell so you never miss an analysis about our history. Your comments and shares are what drive this conversation, so as you're watching, let me know your thoughts. Okay, let's begin. Today we'll talk about Emperor Valens from Roman Byzantine Empire. Friends, Valens was not from the old refined Roman aristocracy. He was from a tough, new money military family from the provinces. His father, Gratian the Elder, was a Pannonian from modern-day Croatia, named Gratianus Major. He was a common soldier who became a legend, famous for his incredible physical strength. He was nicknamed Funarius, the rope man, because he could supposedly outpull 5 men in a tug of war. He rose through the ranks to become a top general, comes, and was granted a large estate, making his family wealthy and respected in military circles. He had brother Valentinian. Force Valens was the younger and less imposing brother of Valentinian. Valens born in 328 AD in Pannonia region. Valens grew up in the same military frontier environment as his brother. His life was the army. However, while Valentinian had a famously distinguished military career and a fierce, commanding personality, Valens's early career was largely unremarkable. The most important part of Valens's background was his religious belief. Like his family, he was a Christian, but unlike his brother Valentinian, who was an Orthodox Nicene Christian, Valens was a devout Arian. He believed in the Arian doctrine, which held that Jesus Christ was a created being and not co-eternal with God the Father. This belief would become the defining and most disastrous feature of his reign. He spent much of his rule persecuting the Orthodox Nicene Christians within his own empire, creating a bitter internal religious conflict at the exact same time he was facing a massive external threat from the Goths. In 364 AD, when Valentinian I was acclaimed emperor, the army demanded he choose a co-emperor to share the burden. Valentinian, trusting his own blood, chose his younger brother Valens. He gave Valens the eastern and wealthier half of the empire to rule, a job for which he was arguably unqualified, while Valentinian himself took the more militarily difficult west. Dear friends, Valens did not win the throne or get chosen by the army. He was appointed by his brother. This was Valentinian's first and most critical decision. Who do you collab with? Who do you share the brand with? Do you pick the most popular, most brilliant general and risk him becoming a rival and murdering you? Or do you pick someone safer? This was a purely political, nepotistic move. Valens was a 36-year-old soldier with a completely unremarkable career. He had no major victories, no great political mind. The historian Ammianus Marcellinus basically calls him mediocre, indecisive, and easily influenced. He was the perfect junior partner. He was loyal, he was family, and he was no threat. And here's the kicker. Valentinian, the alpha male, the superior general, he kept the West for himself. On the surface, this looked like a bad deal for Valentinian. The East was the rich half. It had the ancient cities, the trade, the philosophy, the money. The West was poorer, more rural, and seen as less civilized. But it was a brilliant, cynical move. The West's only problem was the Germanic tribes on the Rhine, a problem Valentinian The great general knew he could handle. The East, however, was a geopolitical nightmare. It had a 1,000-mile border with Rome's real enemy, the Sasanian Persian Empire. It was a constant, draining, cold war that could turn hot at any second. Valentinian kept the easy part and gave his mediocre little brother the part that was a powder keg, ruled from the viper's nest of Constantinople. He set his partner up to fail, and Valens did not disappoint. Valens's 14-year reign was defined by two massive self-inflicted crises. He didn't just mismanage his empire, he actively attacked it. Valens was a devout Christian, but he was the wrong kind of Christian. He was a radical Arian. This was a hugely divisive belief that held that Jesus was a created being, not equal to God the Father. This flew in the face of the Nicene Creed, the Trinity, which most of the empire and his own brother followed. Instead of focusing on the Persians, Valens spent years waging a bitter, internal war against his own people. He launched a massive persecution of the Nicene Christians. He exiled their bishops, seized their churches, and tortured their priests. In political language, friends, we may call it Community Mismanagement 101. He took his largest, most loyal fan base and spent a decade attacking them, telling them they were wrong and turning them into his bitterest enemies. He was so busy fighting his own bishops that he was completely blind to the real threat massing on his northern border. Meanwhile, his main job, the Persian front, was a costly failure. He spent years in Syria, draining his treasury and his best troops in a pointless, back-and-forth border war that he could never win. By 376 AD, Valens gone deeply unpopular emperor in public. His community of Nicene Christians hates him. His brand was in the gutter, and his best companions and elite legions were all tied up in a collab war in the East. He became weak, overextended, and distracted, and that is when the real apocalypse arrives. The Huns from steppes of Asia as new people appeared in 376 AD. The Huns were a terrifying, unknown force. They annihilated the Gothic tribes. The survivors, an entire nation of people known as the Tervini Goths, fled in panic. They arrived at the Danube River, the border of the Roman Empire, and they begged Valens for sanctuary, a huge, strong force. Valens, back in Syria, makes a historic decision. He agrees. He lets them in. This could have been his greatest achievement. He had just gained hundreds of thousands of new farmers and, crucially, new soldiers for his army. But it all went wrong because of one thing: corruption. Valens gave the job of settling the Goths to his local governors, two generals named Lupicinus and Maximus. These men were not statesmen. They were vultures. They saw the refugee crisis as a business opportunity. They stole the food and grain the emperor had sent for the Goths. They let the Goths starve, and then they sold it back to them. The Roman historian Ammianus writes with disgust that the corruption was so bad that Lupicinus and Maximus began trading food for slaves. They sold the Goths dog meat collected from the local towns. And the price for one dog? One Goth child. Friends, listen that again. Roman generals were forcing starving Gothic families to sell their own children into slavery in exchange for the meat of a dead dog. This is the hypocrisy of the empire. The Goths, starved, betrayed, and with nothing left to lose, finally snapped. They revolted. They grabbed whatever weapons they could and began to burn the Balkans. They were no longer refugees. They were an enemy army inside the empire. Valens finally realizes the disaster. He signs a truce with Persia, grabs his eastern army, and marches west. He had one job. His nephew, the new Western Emperor Gratian, Valentinian's son, was marching south with the veteran legions of Gaul. The plan is simple. The two collab partners will meet, join their armies, and crush the Goths together. But Valens was an idiot. He was jealous. Gratian had just won a major victory against the Germans. He was the new hero. Valens, the mediocre emperor who had only known failure, wanted this victory for himself. On August 9th, 378 AD, near the city of Adrianople, Valens gets a report that the Goth army is only 10,000 strong. He thinks, I can take them. I don't need to wait for Gratian. He doesn't wait. His ego takes over. He orders his army to attack. It was a disaster from the start. His army had marched for 8 miles in the blazing summer heat with no water. They were exhausted before the first sword was drawn, and the intelligence was wrong. The 10,000 Goths were just the infantry. Their real weapon, the massive heavy cavalry, was out foraging. Just as the battle began, the Goth cavalry returned. They smashed into the Roman flank like a thunderbolt. The Roman line didn't just break, it dissolved. It was a total, catastrophic rout. The Goths surrounded them. It was a slaughter. 2/3 of the entire Eastern army was killed. 20,000 elite Roman soldiers, 35 of his top generals. It was the worst military defeat Rome had suffered in 400 years. One story says he was wounded by an arrow, dragged to a farmhouse, and when the Goths couldn't break in, they set it on fire and burned him alive. Another story says he was simply cut down in the chaos, his body, stripped of its imperial robes, lost among the 20,000 other corpses. The only thing we know for sure is that his body was never found. The emperor had been erased. The defeat at Adrianople was not just a battle, it was the end of an era. The fail comp was so massive, it broke the empire. The Goths were now inside the empire, and they were never leaving. The new emperor Theodosius had no army to fight them. His only choice was to sign a treaty that settled them inside Roman lands as an autonomous kingdom. The border was gone. The barbarians were now inside the gates, and they were here to stay. This was the wound the Western Roman Empire would never recover from. Emperor Valens was married to Albia Dominica and had 3 children, but his family line effectively ended with his death. Valens's only son was Valentinianus Galatz, born around 366 AD. To secure his dynasty, Valens made this young child consul in 369 AD, clearly designating him as the heir to the Eastern throne. However, Galatz died from illness around 370 AD, when he was only about 4 years old. This was a devastating personal and political blow. It meant that when Valens went into his final battle, he had no male heir to succeed him. Valens also had 2 daughters, Anastasia and Carossa, with his wife, Albia Dominica. Albia Dominica. The empress was in Constantinople when the victorious Goths marched on the undefended capital. In a moment of crisis, she took money from the imperial treasury and paid for a volunteer defense force made up of citizens and Arab workers who successfully defended the city walls. After this heroic act, she retired from public life and lived out her days in obscurity. Anastasia and Carossa, daughters. With no father or brother to champion them, the daughters lost all political importance. They were allowed to live quietly. One daughter, Anastasia, is believed to have later married a Roman general named Richomerus. Roman historians, both contemporary and later, overwhelmingly judge Valens as a disastrous and incompetent emperor. His 14-year reign is seen as a period of paranoia, religious division, and catastrophic military failure, culminating in the single worst Roman defeat in centuries. His legacy is defined by 2 primary failures: his religious persecution and the Battle of Adrianople. Today we ask, friends, who was Valens? Historians see Valens as a paranoid, mediocre, and intolerant emperor who, through his own administrative corruption and personal arrogance, created a crisis with the Goths and then led his army to its death. The Battle of Adrianople is considered the beginning of the end for the Western Roman Empire, and Valens is remembered as the man responsible for it. This is Czar from Czar and Truth, and I want to thank you for watching. If you believe in this channel's mission to uncover the truth, the best way to support it is to engage. Every comment, every share, and every new subscription tells YouTube that these conversations are important and helps them reach more people. Thank you for your incredible support. See you in next thrilling episode of Roman Byzantine Empire.